Welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by the York Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information on the local real estate market, presented by leading experts in the field.
Welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. I'm Morgan York with the York Group of Downing Fry, and we're joined today by our host Jim York and his guest Chris Mitchell, owner of Brightway Insurance.
Thank you, Morgan, for the introduction. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on the show. Let's people that haven't seen you, you've been on prior before, just tell them a little bit about your agency and yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I am. My name is Chris Mitchell. I'm with Brightway Insurance. I have a couple agencies. One is in Naples here at Immokalee Airport, and the other one is in Fort Myers at Daniels Parkway and 75. You know, we're primarily a personal lines agency, which is home, auto, boat, life, flood, motorcycle, those types of things. And yeah, we have over 6,000 customers, and we can write anywhere here in the state of Florida. So.
And what's nice about you, because we do a lot of business together, okay, is that you represent how many different companies?
We work with about 100 different companies.
You know, so you can mix and match the people, get them the best coverage, right? And best premium.
Absolutely. We factor all that in. What is the house you're buying? What's your situation? There are lots of different things, and then we find out what the best fit is for you.
Chris, I guess there's a new topic coming up here that the buzz about in Collier County here in Naples is about new flood zones. So maybe you could just elaborate what's going on with the new flood zones with the government.
Okay. So, you know, in Collier County, the last time they had remapped for flood was 2012. And in 2019, looks like it was set to be remapped. They wanted to revisit it to see what changes need to be made. And a lot of things can trigger this. I mean, certainly time passing is another thing. Hurricanes, which we had, which caused some flooding.
Right.
You know, building, a lot of times the construction you have will factor into, you know, changing the water table and changing where, you know, obviously water is funneled. So those things kind of triggered them to revisit it. And typically it takes a couple years from that initial, you know, inception of it to actually implement the flood zones. So in Collier County, it looks like it's going to be mostly sort of coastal, the areas that are closer to the coast that are going to be affected. And we'll know more about that. I believe some of the maps may have come out, but the maps are not really, they're not too easy to read if you're trying to pull your address. So we don't really have too many specifics at this point, but I would expect those changes to come sometime in 2021.
So mostly the people that are affected would be towards the coast, right?
Yeah, that's what it appears to be, yes.
Are there going to be any, before there was some grandfathering in, would there be that? Or?
Yeah, previously in the last mapping they had what's called a preferred risk extension. And basically what happened in 2012 was a lot of the areas that were changed, prior to them being changed, they were in a flood zone where a lender, for example, wouldn't require you to carry it. And at that time they were moved into flood zones where you would be required to carry it. So in those instances, they would allow you to, you know, have that extension so you would keep that preferred risk rating, which a lot of times is less expensive. So, you know, and that option should be available here as well. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is what we had found the last time they had mapped was that there are several, so flood insurance is based on several things. You have the location of the property, you have the age of the property, the elevation of the property, the occupancy of it. So there are lots of things that factored in. And what we had found in 2012 when they did Collier was that most of the time, the flood zones that they were changed to, which, you know, triggered a lender to say you have to carry it now, quite often the premiums on those policies were in the $400 to $500 range. And that was the vast majority of them. So, and ironically, those are sometimes less expensive than buying a flood policy in a flood zone where you don't have to carry it. So it's not always a real huge, you know, price shock.
Yeah, because I know everybody says flood insurance, they go, oh my gosh, you know, so they think the premium's gonna be out, you know, out of the roof or whatever. So, so basically it's just like anything. It's the age, the elevation, occupancy. So it's not always, you know, I've heard people say $10,000, $8,000.
Yeah, yeah, and the flood zone is, and there's several different types of flood zones, you know, classifications. So a lot of it, that's the main thing, but all those other things factor into it. So yeah, just because they move you to a flood zone, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get some, you know, policy that's several $1,000s. So.
Right, and then people that do not need flood insurance, that you, I think, always recommend maybe you should get it as, like an insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
It is an insurance policy, but, just something that, peace of mind.
Yeah, we always recommend it. I mean, certainly if you're in a situation where, let's say you're on a high rise, you're on the 10th floor. Well,
Right.
in that case, obviously, but we do recommend it because a lot in our market today, there are many carriers that offer you significant discounts for carrying it because in the event of a hurricane, they don't want having an issue adjusting. Maybe get into a difficult scenario in determining was it the hurricane or the flood. And there are a lot of private companies as well writing it. So and I shouldn't say often, but there are many instances where we will find somebody a little better rate with a private company. So yeah, we do recommend it, certainly.
And then a lot of people, I think the misconception is that the floods are going to come from the Gulf of Mexico. So it's, lots of it comes from inside the state of Florida
That's right.
coming towards the Gulf, right? So
Yep.
maybe just elaborate on that.
Yeah, so obviously you have your storm surge, which even though it is caused by a hurricane, that's deemed as a flood claim.
Right.
So that's something that a lot of folks don't understand, but that's what that is. But you also have, you have obviously runoff from other spots, when Okeechobee, or you have just in general low-lying areas that capture a lot of water. For example, when Hurricane Irma came through, just prior to that hitting, we had a week where we had roughly 12 to 16 inches of rain.
Right.
And right after that, the ground was completely saturated. And then you have Hurricane Irma come in, and we had flooding from Marco out to Lehigh. It was everywhere. And it all depends on where that storm hits and the conditions leading up to it. So yeah, it is definitely not just storm surge.
So flood insurance, just to explain this to our viewers, okay? So it could be a lake behind your house or a canal, or it could be the storm water between how they balance it. It can rise and then have flooding. So that would be covered under flood insurance.
That's right. I mean, technically the way they define flood is it's just 2 or more acres or 2 or more properties of normally dry land that are inundated with water. So it's water from the exterior rising from the ground. So that can obviously take multiple forms.
Okay. Chris, we're going to take a little short break, okay, and then we're going to talk about insurance premiums and where they're headed to, okay? We'll be right back in 1 minute. Thank you.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco Island, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group, associated with the #1 brokerage in Southwest Florida, Downing Fry Realty, which produces yearly real estate transactions of over $1 billion. Jim, Michael, and Morgan make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty, with over $275 million in sales transactions, along with offering over 25 combined years' experience in the local market. The Yorks can offer the experience and trust you need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website at www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. Chris, let's talk about insurance premiums, where you think they're headed and what changes there might be coming forward. Not to scare all of us, but I know Florida is the #1 state in insurance cost, right?
Yeah, Florida's the most expensive state in the country for home insurance. I mean, obviously, hurricanes are the primary driver of that. What we're seeing now is, and this is primarily from Irma, there are also a lot of water claims. Those are your most claims that occur most frequently. But you have 3 years to file a claim after a hurricane, and what we're seeing is we're still getting brand new hurricane claims from Irma, and billions have already been paid out. They're still paying out, and you don't see the effects of those claims for a couple years because most of those are paid by what are called reinsurance companies, Lloyd's of London,
Right.
et cetera. So those companies typically don't pass down those rates. It takes them a couple years, and it's shared across the globe. So what we're seeing is, as a result of that, is things are changing in several ways. You have insurance companies that are non-renewing some of their policies. They're determining, hey, we have too many homes we're insuring in certain zip codes. You have other companies that are being very, very stringent on roofs. They're tightening down, hey, we don't want to touch a shingle roof, for example, over 15 years old, tile over sometimes 15 to 20. Some companies aren't even writing policies for homes older than 2010. And then, of course, you get into the rate changes. So what we've seen is literally every single company has been taking rate the last couple of years, and what you're seeing is typically 10%, in that range. Certainly that fluctuates. Some you have higher, some you have lower, but that's only sort of the first round of what we think is coming, because reinsurance filing is going to occur again in June, and you've already got companies kind of filing for another rate increase. And in fact, there are 2 or 3 that are now kind of trying to implement a 40% rate increase, and that's got to go through the state. They have to approve it.
Right. And that's not gonna happen.
But even if they don't approve that, maybe they approve a 15%. Well, then next year they'll probably apply for another 15 and another. And it's, the primary driver against reinsurance. I mean, unfortunately, you have clearly a lot of legitimate claims, but as with anything, sometimes these processes, might maybe get abused. Where things are being filed where they aren't necessarily tied back to the hurricane, and it costs all of us in the end, is really what happens. So,
but that is that going to be across the whole country, you think, or just in Florida? Because it is.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't speak to the country, because what we see, you have carriers that certainly they determine their premiums based on the area. Okay, claims history. Prevalence to hurricanes, water claims, liability, that type of stuff. I can't speak to the rest of the country. I mean, obviously, we've been greatly affected. I mean, the best thing that could happen to us, honestly, is not having, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone, but not having a hurricane for, a few more years to kind of hopefully settle things down.
Yeah, well, you think there'll be new companies coming in because the premiums have gone on, and, it might be more advantageous for them because the premiums are higher?
It's possible. Mm-hmm. That's possible. But we've also seen the flip side. We've seen companies that have gone under. They've been bought out by other companies. And there's some others in the works where some are changing rating. So one of the most important things now is just, you want to make sure the company you're with has been doing business in a while and they're very financially sound. And you can't just do that by looking at reviews online, because, a lot of times the only reviews that get posted are negative, and you'd miss the thousands and thousands that are good. So take those with a grain of salt, when you're reviewing that. It's a little more in depth, but, certainly the viability and the claims handling experience of companies is even more important today. And the other thing I would add is that if your premium is going up, sometimes we're in what's called a hard market. So sometimes your premium may have gone up. It's not necessarily wise to jump to another company to save $200 or $300, even though you in your mind you think, well, I'm saving some money. You might be sacrificing carrier quality and an inspection, finding something that they tell you to repair. So in these types of marketing conditions, a lot of times it can be best to stay put. Not all the time, but it certainly is something to consider.
Well, Chris, I thank you for coming on the show today, and I know you're part of our team, okay? So I know we've never had an unsatisfied customer with you, and they've always been complimentary. So appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you maybe in the fall again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.